Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It is September 1st. It's Friday, and this is FPC Radio Live. And John, we're almost to the best month of the year, and we all know October is very clearly the best month of the year. I'm not going to take any argument otherwise, but I do want to. I want to start. I mean, look, I have some. Aside from the fact that it is my birthday month, although, as you know, the older you get, the less those birthday months really matter. In fact, you almost dread them. The higher up in age you get, but no, there's a lot of legitimate reason for why October is great. Obviously, Halloween, one of the best holidays of the year. Great festivities. I love it. You have baseball in the playoffs, hockey starting, basketball starting, and football. Really, you're past that initial honeymoon phase of oh my God, it's a brand new season. This is great. By the time you hit October, you've settled in. You're used to the routine, and you're in the season mode. And for the most part, John, most teams are still in the race in October. So a lot of legitimate reason for October being one of the best month.
Yeah, and in the Northeast, we love the weather too,
yes,
because you get
correct.
those cool days, nice nights.
Well, even down here, John,
Sure.
September is essentially still summer weather for us. It's hurricane season. It's muggy. But October, you start to that chill. I say chill. Mm-hmm. It's all relative here. But that quote unquote chill starts to creep in down here in Florida. So it's a great month. It's a great month, John. I can't complain. So. Yesterday we spent some time, and by some time I mean the entire show, talking about Joe Montana's latest opinion about who the greatest quarterback of all time is, and we had some fun with it because it's kind of silly. I think I know the reason why, and it's not something that I posted, but one of my favorite accounts out there at @TB_facts. Tom Brady facts. I love it. Because that's all they deal with, John, is facts. Not opinion, facts. Posted something today, and I love it. Tom Brady had Joe Montana's career twice. Twice, John. 2 times. From 2001 to 2011, 39,973 yards. Joe Montana, 40,551 yards. Brady, more touchdowns. Obviously, I mean, the error difference is going to help that a little bit. I'm not putting all the weight in that, but, to kind of lay it out, the similarities. Regular season wins, playoff record. Brady had a better playoff record. Super Bowls, appearances, Brady more. Obviously, Joe Montana more rings. And then it goes on to say Tom Brady from 2012 to 2022, and now he just kind of blows him out of the water in this sense. So, I think that's why, John. I think that's the reason why every so often when Joe Montana is asked this question, he comes across maybe a little bitter.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Montana, he has said that Brady is the greatest quarterback. Now he's saying Marino is the best quarterback, so they're having that, back and forth with greatest and best, which do mean the same thing. Like, who's the greatest quarterback, who's the best quarterback? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's Tom Brady. And who knows how the interview went. There's no audio of it. It's an interview with Men's Health. And, maybe he's just talking off the cuff or whatever. Who knows? It gets detailed in that sense. No, I mean, we've talked about it, that Brady essentially had 3 Hall of Fame careers. One is Troy Aikman, one is Dan Marino, and one is Joe Montana. So, that's unheard of to have 3 Hall of Fame careers. I think LeBron James might be the only other contemporary athlete to have that as well. So, yeah, no, I mean, the discussion part of it is crazy. I just always push back that it's always Dan Marino that gets put into the discussion and not John Elway or some other quarterbacks that I think are more worthy.
Well, John Elway is nowhere near the statistical, god that Dan Marino is. Don't you know that? Oh, wait a minute. Hold on.
You're ready.
I'm ready. I'm ready for this because I was talking about it off there, and it's becoming more and more a potential reality that this might be my villain origin story. And by villain, I mean the anti-Dan Marino, because, I said it yesterday, it's kind of getting a little out of control with this, anointment of Dan Marino. Oh, he'd throw 6,000 yards and 60 touchdowns. No, he wouldn't. I mean, he just wouldn't. I mean, let's be real here. He'd be, I'm not saying he wouldn't be an elite quarterback. Yeah, absolutely he would. He'd be right there with every other elite quarterback. But that's the point. He's not going to lap the field, because it's just not true. Well, what would you call the mythology, mysticism, I guess. I don't know, whatever you want to call it around him. It's just ballooned to something that's just kind of out of control right now. But to give you an idea, though, and I brought this up yesterday, post that 3-year stretch, which, again, you can argue may be one of the best 3-year stretches of any quarterback in the history of the NFL. And I'm talking about Dan Marino from 1984, 85, and 86. From 1987 until he retired, he averaged 21 touchdowns and 17 interceptions and 3,300 yards passing. You know what John Elway was? 20 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and about 3,300 yards. So you tell me, John, Dan Marino is this statistical godsend, who would surpass every quarterback in today's game, but John Elway wasn't really that good because the stats weren't good. How does that make sense, John? How does that make sense?
Well, it doesn't, because during that stretch, also John Elway went to 4 Super Bowls and won
yes.
2 of them. And Dan
So
Marino
John
didn't go to any Super
did
Bowl.
win. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think he carried a lot of mediocre teams. 3 Super Bowls he lost, I thought those teams were so far inferior to the teams they lost to, it wasn't even funny. I mean, look at the scores. I mean, he was just overwhelmed. Finally, when they got him a decent running game and a decent defense, he won back-to-back Super Bowls in his final 2 years. Plus, he I think, had better intangibles than Marino, in a sense that I think his teammates really liked playing with him. Marino was kind of a little bit like Aaron Rodgers, in the sense that, if he threw an interception and incompletion, it was someone else's fault, not necessarily his, where I think Elway was a better leader than Dan Marino, and that kind of all goes into a better athlete in terms of ability to run, because he could beat you with his legs as well. The Patriots never beat John Elway. In his entire career, I believe he was 7-0 against the Patriots. So growing up a Patriots fan, I feared him more than anyone. Like, they just had no way to beat him, because he was never out of a game.
Well, and that's the thing. You said it before, intangibles, and obviously something you can't really measure, but it's such an important part of the quarterback position, because it's not necessarily how many touchdowns or how many yards you throw. It's about when. I mean, that's the most important thing. It's when you do it. Are you doing it when the game is well in hand and you're just kind of stockpiling, or are you doing it against bad teams? Are you doing it against, are you taking advantage of certain situations, or are you making clutch plays and making plays on 3rd and long when you absolutely need it? All of these things matter, but you don't. There's no number, there's no metric that you can throw up and say, hey, this is their intangible rating. No, it doesn't exist. You can't do it. I mean, you can't. Again, people have tried to convince themselves they can quantify other parts of a quarterback's performance with a number, let alone trying to do an intangible. And it's all impossible, because it's such, the position is so complicated that you can't narrow it down by one or even like 2 metrics. But regardless, though, I do find it funny how the narratives have shifted. And again, I mean, part of that vocal anti-Elway crowd comes from Missouri. Not surprisingly. No bias there, John. None whatsoever. And then look, I'm not even necessarily, arguing that Elway was 10 times the quarterback Marino is. No, I mean, they were 2 of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, and they happen to play at the very same time. I just push back at this outrageous, again, a ballooning narrative right now with you remember the chick from Willy Wonka who ate that, turned blue and kept blowing up and blowing out. That's what's happening right now with this Marino reputation. It's somehow just, again, I think maybe this is my bias coming into it, but I feel like it's a lot about it's a lot of anti-Brady, because, like, here's the thing. One of the biggest arguments against Brady, and I'm not saying it's legit. Actually, I'm saying the opposite of that. I'm saying it's outrageously not legit. But is this talent argument that X quarterback has pure talent, Brady doesn't? I mean, that's foolish. It's stupid. It makes zero sense. And really, it's just kind of a cop out argument because, well, 99 out of 100 times, that person cannot actually articulate what they mean by talent. It's just this saying. So, well, who's the champion of the Super Bowl or stat or wins aren't a quarterback stat? Well, it's Dan Marino because, well, of course, Dan Marino is so talented and he never won a Super Bowl, so it clearly has nothing to do with the quarterback. Oh, but it does, though, John. It does. So they're going to champion Dan Marino. His reputation's going to grow. Thank you. Joel Veruca Salt. Yeah, I kind of. I haven't seen Willy Wonka. I haven't seen that in a long time. So you're gonna have to cut me some slack here. But the point is, for those, a lot of it's anti-Brady because I've said it before. I said it yesterday. You can't explain. People can just not come to grips with the fact that this guy was drafted as late as he was and he was as good as he was. There has to be some other explanation other than he's just great and has a lot of talent. So they come up with these, well, stats aren't, wins aren't a quarterback stat. And I mean, basically throwing out everything they know about football, they're just ignoring just to go with this narrative. And I think a lot of that, again, has to do with, exhaustion over Brady. So naturally, who are they going to champion? Well, arguably the greatest quarterback never to win a Super Bowl, and that's Dan Marino. So yeah, to me, it's kind of silly because when push comes to shove, I want the guy who had similar, comparable numbers, and who went to 5 Super Bowls and won 2. And that's John Elway.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't even think there's much of a debate there. Elway.
Oh no, there's plenty of debate though. That's the point.
Yeah.
Well, no,
in my mind,
I agree with that. Yeah,
there's a clear difference. Again, Marino was great. Elway greater. I've said this a million times. If you dropped every quarterback into the same exact situation, Elway may have been the greatest quarterback ever. I don't know, but in terms of era, head coach, comparable defenses that they played with, comparable offensive lines, all of that stuff, he's right up there. I mean, I guess ask the people that played with him and against him what they thought of him. And Marino was great as well, but I think Elway was I would say significantly better, but just better, and that's enough. So,
Oh no, I'm agreeing with you because it's like, again, that's we're neither of us are trying to say Marino wasn't great. It's just he wouldn't come into this league and throw 60 touchdowns and 6,000 yards.
No,
it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And again, there's no logic that dictates that other than your mind's trapped in 1984. And
right,
quite frankly, that's kind of. It's just, again, it's silly because it's like, yeah, well, if you have every season like you had in 1984, maybe you have a point, but he didn't. And the majority of his career was much along the lines of every other elite quarterback during that era, except he just paled in comparison to some when it comes to Super Bowl appearances and wins. So, anyways, I don't know if you guys can hear this coming over the microphone, but the buzzing, I think, is coming from outside. So we might have to actually wrap this up a little bit early today because I don't want that to annoy people listening. But real quick, though, I did want to ask you, Chris Jones. Now, how important do you think he is to the Chiefs' success? Because, again, you're looking at a guy who you can argue is one of the, 5 best defensive players in the NFL. Holding out, it doesn't look like this is going to be resolved. Now, we've seen the Patriots go pretty much to the edge of the plank with a guy like Richard Seymour. Ultimately, they ended up trading him. So, I mean, they did, because he held out. Do I remember this correctly? He held out late into the season. Not late, but like into the season, and then did actually come back.
Yeah, he had held out, came back, and then he was traded the following season before the 09 season.
Yeah.
Right.
So
he was traded to the Raiders for a first-round pick, which turned out to be Nate Solder.
Right. And I mean, that worked out pretty swimmingly, I would say. Pretty swimmingly for him. But yeah, Joel brings up a point. Like if Chris Jones sits out, he's going to lose over $1 million a game. But I guess if you're banking on yourself as one of the best defensive players in the league, you might be willing to sacrifice some of that money to get the contract you think you deserve. And I think his value, and here's the thing too, like it might be worth it for him to not play so the Chiefs can kind of get a feel. Now, again, this could backfire and they could see like, oh, okay, we're actually, maybe we're not as good, but we're still in pretty good shape without him. Or they could be an absolute, sieve of a defense, and they could come crawling back and be like, okay, we need Chris Jones back. Let's just give him whatever he wants. So it could be a good gamble on Chris Jones's part. But I think he's crucial. Obviously, the driving force of that team is their offense. But I just think the impact he has on the field, there's very few players in the league right now that have that type of impact. You're talking Micah Parsons, maybe like a Nick Bosa, who, again, that's another guy that could, is having a little bit of drama in the offseason, and potentially could see his future kind of swing in the balance. But very few guys that are on that par that have that big of an impact on the game as an individual.
Yeah, and he's an interior defensive lineman too, and he's so versatile and gives you that pass rush from the inside, which is so valuable. 30 years ago, the Dallas Cowboys won the Super Bowl in 1992. Emmitt Smith held out at the beginning of 93. Missed the first two games. The Cowboys were 0-2, and they quickly signed Emmitt Smith and then went on and won another Super Bowl. So I don't know if Chris Jones will have that type of impact because he's a defensive player, and it's tough to measure sometimes how impactful a player like that is, but he is outstanding without question. And I think that, they would certainly behoove them getting him settled up.
Yeah, no, but this is the thing, and I'm not saying obviously when you look around the landscape of the the NFL and the contracts that are being given to the quarterbacks, like Patrick Mahomes isn't terrible, but the reality of it is it still takes up a large portion of the salary cap, and you're starting to see some of that impact those around like him. Obviously, you've seen Tyreek Hill get moved. Travis Kelce's contract is a nice one, again, especially compared to what TJ Hawkinson just got yesterday. But there's still going to be impact to the depth of this team. And I don't know, just because the margin of victory was so slim, and I do think other teams are not catching up, but I think the Bengals are a process. They're growing. I think the Bills are still going to be a good team. I have questions about Miami because I'm not sold on Tua yet. But like I said, I don't know if the margin of victory was slim to the point where Chris Jones is going to swing that the other way. You know what I'm saying? Because you win your playoff games by, you brought it up yesterday, a combined 16 points in 3 games.
They won by 7, 3, and 3, so 13 points.
Yeah,
close.
Yeah, so
yeah,
I don't know. We'll see, but it's getting pretty close because hey, 6 days from now, Chiefs kick off the season. So I'd be very surprised if we see him at least week 1. So, but all right, well,
yeah, he's an important guy, obviously, but they run their place like a business, like most of these teams do.
Right. So, all right. Well, sorry, I'm going to have to, for all those listening, we'll have to cut this off a little bit short because there's a lot of noise outside my window right now, and it's coming through on my microphone, so I know it's coming through for you guys as well. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Next week, week 1. So we're going to really get into a lot of the week 1 matchups and get back into the groove of the NFL season. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.